Both Apple and AMD have made some serious strides in the processor world in the past year or so. Apple has released their M1 chip, which provides significant power increases over their previous Intel-based systems, and they do that without drawing too much actual electricity. AMD, on the other hand, has also increased the power year over year with their Ryzen 5000 series of mobile processors, and those processors are remarkably powerful, and also they can be found in laptops that don't break the bank. So what happens when you put these chips in the Asus G14 and the MacBook Air, both which can be similarly priced? What happens when we smash them together? Let's find out. Okay, the MacBook slammed better than the Asus. What's up, everyone? I'm the Everyday Dad, and if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. The biggest difference right off the bat between these two computers, obviously, is the operating system. And before we even really start digging into their performance or specification differences, I do want to mention that if you have specific needs for either operating system, obviously that is the one you should choose. The cool whiz-bang things that each of these can do, and yes, both are pretty darn impressive in the whiz-bang technology department. It doesn't matter if you can't use them. So let's quickly talk specs and ordering options if you've never actually heard of either of these computers. The M1 MacBook Air can be had for around $1,000 or less, depending if you can find it on the Apple refurbished site. You can get that base model that will have an 8-core M1 CPU, 7-core integrated GPU, 256GB solid-state drive, and 8GB of unified memory. That's the RAM. You can take that all the way up to the 8-core GPU, 2TB solid-state drive, and 16GB of unified memory for a little over $2,000. This G14 model that I've got today comes with the 8-core Ryzen 5900HS processor, a 1TB solid-state drive, 16GB of RAM, and 3060 graphics card. And all of this can be had for right around $1,500. So pretty similar if we start stacking upgrades onto the MacBook Air. And yes, $1,000 or $1,500, that is very expensive. But what you get here, they're pretty phenomenal value for what you pay for. When we start looking at these values, they do kind of take a different approach to their design philosophy. The MacBook Air is a small, slim chunk of aluminum that is both very, very lightweight and it's incredibly small. Where the Asus, even though it's more of kind of an Ultrabook, it's more of an Ultrabook cough gaming laptop cough. So it does have a more rigid, angular look to it, but that doesn't mean this thing looks bad, because I don't think this thing does look bad. I think it looks pretty good, actually. The body of the G14 is solidly made of metal, and it's really kind of shocking just how small this laptop is. Yes, we already said the MacBook Air is also very small, but it's also missing some key things that laptops usually have. So the fact that the Asus has an active cooling system, a graphics card, and a legit amount of I/O, it really impresses me for the size. I mean, look at this thing. If you can hold one of these, you will be genuinely shocked about how small it is. Talking about that I/O, the MacBook Air, not just the MacBook Air, everything in the MacBook line, they're severely lacking when it comes to interfacing with accessories or a working from home setup. They've only got 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports. On the G14, you get many more options. You get 2 USB-C, 2 USB-A, and an HDMI 2.0 port. It's not as many compared to other gaming laptops, but when compared to the MacBook, it's incredible. It's not perfect though. I would say the biggest issue with the Asus when it comes to the I/O is that these USB-C ports are only USB-C 3.2. They are not Thunderbolt enabled like the ones in the MacBook Air. And I do kind of consider the lack of Thunderbolt 3 ports to be kind of a huge lacking feature on the G14, but we do have those other plugs, so it kind of makes up for it, but it sucks that it does not have Thunderbolt 3. Display-wise, both of these laptops excel and fail in different ways from each other. So neither of these displays are objectively better. The Zephyrus is rocking a 2560 by 1440 16:9 panel with 144 Hz refresh rate. It's also rated for DCI P3 color accuracy right out of the box. And while the bezels aren't anything special, it is a nice, fast refresh rate panel. The MacBook Air has a 2560 by 1600 display that is just gorgeous. It also has P3 color accuracy, but it is limited to a 60 Hz refresh rate instead of that faster option on the G14. And when you're asking, is that important? You're going to need to decide if you need that smoother motion. I think looking at them, the Retina panel does look better. But let's talk about when it comes to my favorite thing on planet Earth, that's typing, obviously typing. The Everyday Dad is the Everyday Typer. That's rebranding the channel, the Everyday Typing Dad. This is closer than I think I've really ever seen when it comes to laptops. Since the update to their new Magic Keyboard, Apple laptops have swept the competition. There is nothing else in the market that wins when it comes to getting into a nice typing groove, and the MacBook Air easily keeps up this tradition. Plus, I also like the way the body of the Air is shaped, giving it a slight wedge shape, which allows for a much more comfortable and pain-free typing experience. I have, no kidding, typed for hours on this specific laptop, and every single time I do it, it's great. The reason this is surprising though is normally gaming laptops or productivity laptops made by gaming laptop companies, they don't have the best keyboards because typing for those are more of an afterthought. But the keys here are actually really nice to type with. The keys themselves though, they feel kind of cheap. They feel pretty good when working the keys themselves just feel plasticky. That doesn't necessarily take anything away from how they operate, just keep it in mind. A neat trick that the G14 does is the way the monitor is attached to the laptop, when you open it, it will raise up the whole laptop. Can you see that? It raises it up, also giving it a little bit of a slight wedge shape. I really like wedge-shaped laptops. Nothing irritates me more than when I'm trying to get a memo written or email drafted, and on a more boxy laptop, you can easily get these little edge marks pressed into your forearms from the body of the computer. And honestly, it's uncomfortable, and I'd prefer, radical thought here, I'd prefer to not be in discomfort when working or using my expensive technology. And thankfully here, you don't have any issues. This is a very comfortable computer to type on. And one other quick thing to mention that the G14 does have over the MacBook Air is this can be user upgradable. You can upgrade the internal M.2 SSD inside of the chassis and can even upgrade one of the RAM chips. 8 gigabytes will always be soldered to the motherboard, but you can add up to another 32 gigabytes of RAM in the removable slot. You will lose out on dual channel memory benefits, which is pretty big, but if you don't mind that, it would only take a few seconds to upgrade this computer. So kudos to Asus for having both an upgradable computer and a very good typing experience. You know what? Kudos to both manufacturers for keeping me and other office workers happy here. Okay, let's get on to something that sounds like it could be objective, but when the underlying operating systems work so much differently, this is actually pretty subjective, and that's the power. Straight up, both of these computers are remarkably powerful. Each in its own way is shocking that such a small device, whether it's the Mac or the Asus, it's shocking that either of these can pump out the static numbers that they do. Here are some quick numbers to show what I'm talking about from Cinebench R23. Yes, the G14 easily wins in multi-core performance. This new set, like the new Ryzen processors, are multi-core monsters. They demolish everything in their path. I don't know how they were able to fit in so much power into such a small laptop. In single core performance, things are much closer, with both machines being just a hair below the current top dog Intel 11th Gen i7, but meh to power. Meh to power. The biggest difference will be graphically. The 7 or 8 core integrated GPU on the M1 MacBook Air is fantastic, and for an integrated graphics option, it's pretty remarkable. And you know, what software companies are able to do when they fully leverage the Apple Silicon OS with this graphics card, it's pretty remarkable, but it's still an integrated graphics card. If you need more brute force graphics power, the new NVIDIA 3000 series cards will trump whatever Apple has right now. They just will. Programs that really require the oomph a graphics card brings, like my preferred video editing software DaVinci Resolve, can be optimized to work well on the Air, but without a dedicated graphics option, it's not the same. This will render and edit video fine, but it'll only render about real time, whereas this will render video twice real time. It's so good. Plus, if you want to do any gaming, that dedicated graphics card and Windows will give you a much better experience. But, and I saved this for the power discussion instead of the physical design discussion, because there's a huge usability difference between them when it comes to power and design. The MacBook Air does not have an internal active cooling system. There is no fan built into this computer. There's no fan in this body. But despite that, it actually does a really good job with its thermal management. The G14, like we mentioned earlier, does have an active cooling system. And while it does a good job keeping the laptop cool, even after I'd been playing World of Warcraft for a ridiculously long time, you will hear the fan noise when doing so. And sometimes when in use, the fan noise will spike for a few moments, causing a very distracting little scene. Obviously, if you are already all in on Windows, fan noise will not be that big of a deal. You already deal with that with every other computer, and the G14 isn't bad in Windows world. But if you are coming from the M1 computers, you are absolutely spoiled with the quietness of operation, and the G14 will be a distracting step backwards. I'm sorry, I try not to go on about fan noise too much anymore, but the M1 computers have absolutely changed a lot about what we should expect from a portable computer. And speaking of portable computer, how do these work portability wise? If I want to take one of these and use it as a home computer and a work travel computer on the road, how do they stack up? Well, the M1 MacBook Air is very small, very powerful, and has 18 hours of battery life. 18 hours of battery life. I love saying that. We haven't been talking about the M1 so much, so I don't get to yell that as often as I would like. I love it. This laptop is the ultimate dual use option where thanks to that Thunderbolt 3, it'll easily fit into a work from home setup with a dock. And when out and about, it's the full Apple experience without worrying if iPadOS is not going to be able to work the specific way you want, or without worrying if it's going to die when it's not plugged in. And when it's not plugged in, you still get all of the power we talked about earlier. This is so good. The G14 is also very good. Like we said earlier, it's remarkably small. For what you get, I still get surprised every time I pick this up. This is so small, but it still stands up respectably to the power of my actual desktop PC. This does also have usable battery life, clocking in at around 11 hours, and anything over 8 is just icing on the cake. So the fact that both computers can go for a few hours longer than that will give you very good peace of mind when trying to work from them. The big difference here will be the G14 will absolutely take a performance hit when not plugged in, but it's not as bad as some other Windows machines, and I was able to maintain some actual power and still had the twice as fast as real-time rendering when doing video editing unplugged. And you know what? I'm pretty happy with that. I think usability-wise, it's going to come down to if you've already got a Thunderbolt 3 accessory sort of system set up at your house, the M1 MacBook will just so easily line up with that. But if you like plugging individual things into a computer, like a monitor, a mouse, a keyboard, etc., the G14 with its built-in I/O make that so much easier, which could be better for a work computer, as not many offices, at least not in the offices that I've been in, will have cutting-edge Thunderbolt 3 options. But at the end of the day, so what, right? Which of these laptops wins the battle for my recommendation? These are my two favorite laptops currently on the market. Each of them is so good in its own way, and it just dominates what else is out there from a power, price, size, and usability standpoint. The M1 MacBook Air is mind-shatteringly impressive for its size and power and price. And that it's all of that and so well thermally managed, it's become the bar with which I compare everything else against, and not many things can stand up to it. But the G14 does a very good job of doing just that. Most other Windows laptops that meet the M1 power have to be much bigger, or they have to sacrifice the one real benefit these computers have, which is the dedicated graphics card. So you look at the productivity machine landscape, they all have like Intel integrated graphics, which is not going to stand up to this. The G14 doesn't sacrifice anything. Well, besides a webcam. It doesn't have a webcam. That's kind of weird. And I think this stands up really well to the MacBook Air. And I don't know that I've said that before. I could easily recommend either of these to you depending on your needs. Here, it's absolutely going to come down to the operating system. Both of these are just too darn good to really pull you away based on a slip up of either. So neither of these fails enough to be like, oh, it's time to transition. So you got to look at what your needs. Either's gonna be great. And if you liked this video and would like to see a little bit more about the G14, here's my unboxing and initial impressions video that will get you more acquainted with this tiny titan. You can find it by clicking right here. Click, 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 click. Thanks for watching.